Mark, welcome to the Guild of Dads podcast.
Hi Joe, you okay?
You're not bad in yourself?
Yeah, good, not too bad.
Good.
I will speak slow because I'm from Wales, so I know you can put subtitles on after if you want to, but I'll try and speak as slow as I can now.
I've got fond memories of Wales actually from my teens, funnily enough, because my youth was spent cycling and in particular cycle racing. And for 2 years on the trot, I did something that was called the Junior Tour of Wales, which was based around Abergavenny. And if you've ever seen the roads around Abergavenny, they're not really conducive to a 6'2" lad from the southeast dragging his backside up and down these hills. So I have memories of crossing the Severn Bridge, and it's almost like someone had drawn a line across the Severn Bridge where the clouds part and it starts raining as soon as you get across the Severn Bridge on
Yeah, it's true.
August bank holiday.
It's definitely true.
But yeah, I remember there was one hill in particular, Tumble Mountain, I think it is, as you come out of it's just outside Abergavenny, and turn in this bend at the bottom and just seeing the road go straight up, and there's all these kind of little mountain goats from Yorkshire and Scotland and the local lads from the valleys and that, and I was like, right, I'm just gonna stick it in bottom gear and I'll get to the top when I get to the top. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. It's that's one thing. I got big calves. I have big calves. So all these mountains, but that's one thing I'm really into walking now in the mountains. But more since lockdown. So yeah, it's great. It's got its benefits.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely, my memories of that area is just absolutely beautiful. As you kind of, particularly as you're sort of coming down from the through the clouds and whatever, and you can see the valleys below you and stuff, and it was just incredible, like breathtaking countryside and stuff as you go up to the beacons and stuff and that. So, but yeah, reminiscing.
That's good.
I've got you on here today to talk about a subject which is kind of, I don't think a lot of dads and a lot of men will really kind of either understand it or heard of it. It's one of those things I think that's kind of on the fringes, so to speak, of a lot of people's kind of conception around kind of being a dad and having children, and that is the issue of. I'm going to try and use the right terminology. You're going to correct me on this, I know you are, but I would call it fathers. Postnatal depression, but there's a proper word for it, isn't there?
Post depression in fathers. Yeah, definitely like paternal depression or
Okay.
perinatal mental health. Perinatal mental health is the big umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
So it's antenatal anxiety depression, and then you got postnatal depression. That's the first year after the baby's been born.
Okay.
And then you got psychosis then. So it's like dementia. You got the big umbrella, and you get all like Alzheimer's and COSCOP, all these different under that umbrella, if that makes sense. You know,
Okay.
so perinatal mental health is
Is a kind of
one
umbrella
thing,
term. Okay. Yeah.
big
Okay.
umbrella.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Because most people, I think, probably if they remember their wives, or if they're in the process of their wives or partners having children, it's kind of it's prenatal and postnatal and antenatal. But I'd never. I just used to go along to the meetings and just nod and just say, okay, yeah, I fully understand,
Yeah.
even when I didn't.
Yeah, no, I was saying 16 years ago I was exactly the same, definitely. And yeah, it's a big stigma. Men's mental health, as you know, especially in the UK, it's the biggest killer in men under 50 is suicide. And I'll talk about it. It's actually higher risk, a lot of high risk in new dads because it does manifest into other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, there's no screening yet. It's coming in. We screen mums for their mental health, but we should be screening dads as well, new dads. And so there's various reasons why fathers get depressed in the postnatal period, which is the first year. Which I'll explain. There's always been a myth about hormonal. There's no really strong evidence that postnatal depression is caused by that. There could be one of the factors, but it could be a range of reasons. But there's testosterone actually lowers in fathers during this time as well, and that in itself can cause fatigue and depression and so on. So there's loads of reasons. Mums and dads, there's no reason you can't say I had postnatal depression because of that. It's impossible because a lot of parents got a past history of anxiety or depression or trauma, and then you got the lack of sleep. even those combinations can have an impact during that first year.
So it sounds like a perfect storm. So where did your kind of experience start? Where did your story start in terms of your journey and your experience of it yourself and finding out about being in the kind of the eye of the storm, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. I take it back to my childhood because, like a lot of parents, like I mentioned, I've gone through like low self-esteem, or various reasons, anxiety. So I'm from Upper Valleys. My father was a miner. My grandfather was a miner. I'm the first generation not to go underground. So you can imagine Upper Valleys is very much, you've got a problem, let's go to the pub, let's have a drink. So that was my coping skill, if I had any, as later from, 13 onwards, if I had any anxiety in school. Unfortunately for me in school in the 80s, it wasn't the best. I couldn't keep still, I'm 46, 47 next, and I'm still hyperactive. But I didn't know at the time I had an undiagnosed disorder called ADHD. And ADHD is like any disorder. It can get milder as you get older, but it's like bipolar, schizophrenia. You have it for life, So a lot of people our age undiagnosed with ADHD, so that's another factor as well. But in school, like I said, I couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate, hyperactive. I'd play up, get out the class, and there'd be a class clown. I wasn't interested in the subjects that I was being taught. And what I know now is if I'm really interested in something, I will hyper-focus, I will look into things, I will, juggle it around and very creative, that sort of thing. So fortunately for me, my mother took me to a youth club at 8 years of age. And the youth worker at the time, he said, we'll bring him in, don't worry about him, we'll sort him out. And it's the first time I had somebody actually say to me, my parents are great, fantastic, but I didn't have a conversation and say, look, don't worry what anyone thinks. You can do anything with your life. Don't let anyone tell you can't do anything. And a gentleman named Stan, and he trained me up, and I went on to be a British champion. And so I had a lot of good self-esteem coming from the youth club. So I leveled out from the school. I don't blame the teachers, but unfortunately the teacher, I remember, 15, teacher said, oh, you'll never get a job. You never do anything with your life. And I had, window cleaning around and a paper round, So, just to, I've been a bit of a grafter, like a lot of people in their lives, So, yeah, it was a lot of stuff that, good came out to something bad that time, But yeah, it was really after then I left the youth club where you probably remember the rave scene and the 1990s came in, and I just went down a different path. I was taking a lot of drugs, alcohol, all the stuff that came in the 90s, and yeah, I was really I'm the sort of person that don't do things by half. I just I just was 7 years just doing all that stuff, Joe, so not something I'm proud of, but I think it's made me as a person as well, and you got to go for these difficulties and to become a better person sometimes as well.
Yeah. Well, it frames your point of reference for later on down the line, doesn't it? So, and in that period, did you find that when you were kind of getting into the whole partying and stuff, did you find that you were using it as kind of like a way in which to kind of sedate how you felt in some respects? Were you running away from kind of thoughts and feelings about how you felt about yourself and using that as a self-medication strategy?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of things, my mind was racing constantly, couldn't focus, and obviously, unfortunately, the drugs did, stop my mind racing as like it did. And you're part of like a community, and I know it sounds, you're part of something, you're part of this music scene and all sorts of things, when Ibiza and all this stuff, and then you start being a class clown then a bit, and I was, I just, even in school, I used to climb up telephone masks and all sorts of things and run in front of, it's hard to believe now when I look back, the things I did during the 90s, as well, I was just a class clown. I'm still a class clown, but not like I was then, but
just not not climbing up telephone poles anymore.
No, no, no. I did. I get in the Tesco trolley and somebody chuck me down the road and all those sorts of. I've never been horrible to anyone, or it was just basic pranks and those sorts of behaviours. That's one thing. I'm very cautious of other people, but yeah, definitely, I was anxiety, confidence building came from unfortunately using alcohol and drugs and that sort of thing. Definitely right.
So you're out getting into this kind of party scene, and you're kind of self-medicating how you feel about yourself and all that stuff. What happens next? You presumably meet your now wife at some point in that timeline of events and stuff. How long were you guys together before you found out that you were going to be pregnant, or your wife was going to be pregnant, more accurately?
Yeah, well, I was in a factory, always worked during that time, always worked, and met my wife, Michelle, and totally changed. I came back from holidays with my friends and met my wife, and just split up with an ex-girlfriend, met my wife 10 months later, and in a bar. I said, I met you 10 months ago. She didn't recognize me or remember me. I remembered her, and we just clicked, and in that time, I went into sales and my career totally changed. Financially, I was, company car, all the material stuff. I was holidays, we were going traveling, went Australia, went all over the place, Bali. We were give up my job. Good thing with sales, I'd get bored, go into another job, get the top, get bored. I was just using the money to just do what I wanted to do, things that I like, activities, all sorts of things. So a lot of benefits came out to sales. I didn't get the purpose I got now out to sales. And but yeah, you're right. Got married, and I was 30 years of age. Thought I was prepared for fatherhood, and then basically it was my wife's 22 hours labour. The doctors came rushing in and said, Mr. Williams' wife needs emergency C-section. We need to get into theatre quick. And it was the first time I actually ever had a panic attack like that. I never had a panic attack ever like that ever since either. And I went into theatre, and what I witnessed, what we know now is PTSD. So a lot of people think, what's PTSD? We know it's post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's actually an anxiety disorder, either witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, I've worked in secure units. I witnessed horrific things, but nothing worse thinking your wife and baby is going to die in that situation, So Michelle went on to have severe post-natal depression, where we believe now there's an overlap as well, because the symptoms from the PTSD can overlap into anxiety and depression. And, I went from expecting me back in work in 2 weeks. I was self-employed at the time. Mm-hmm. New mortgage, money worries were starting to come in. I was home for 6 months. And all of a sudden, my wife's in crisis team. I witnessed what she did because she didn't want to be here at that time. Mm-hmm. She had severe post-natal depression. And all of a sudden, you start thinking as a father then, is there anything I've done? What I've done? Is it me? I didn't initially bond with my son either. And I think that bond and attachment grew when I was home for 6 months because, skin to skin releases oxytocin, all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And so something good came out that 6 months. But I was, as a father, I think that how it happened so quick, I was just relieved he was alive. So I couldn't process things I thought. And I was starting, my personality totally changed in that first year of fatherhood. I was starting to get angry, punch the sofa, bust my hand. And anyone knows me, I'm so laid back normally, but even my friends said, Mark, why I was even starting fights with bouncers, not because it was just when somebody's hit me, it was like another form of self-harm, I was avoiding situations. I was, alcohol came in massively in. Never been dependent on alcohol, but I was using it. So I was lucky my family was around Michelle. Mm-hmm. So I could, have our space and go out and just, pretend to go work. And when it did after that 6 months, but I wasn't the same person that first year of fatherhood for various reasons. And even a lack of sleep can have an impact on your mental health alone, you know. So all of a sudden, somebody who was totally uneducated about mental health 16 years ago, you can imagine the stigma then. It's a lot better now because people are getting more educated about it. But certainly back then, you know, I couldn't tell my wife how I was feeling because I didn't want it to impact on her mental health. And I was getting suicidal thoughts around about the 4 to 5 month mark, and never made a plan to take my life. But I was getting thoughts, you know, why, you know, I can't provide my family now. It was all sorts of things. And even when I went back, trying to get back into sales, I couldn't take the pressures of a target like I had before I became a dad as well, you know. So yeah, there was loads of factors, Joe, around that time. Loads of reasons why I was depressed in the postnatal period as well.
Yeah. And that's sometimes I've heard sometimes that plays out as a kind of double whammy, doesn't it? When mum has got postnatal depression at the same time as dad's feeling down, and one doesn't want to burden the other with telling them how they feel, and there's a kind of slightly codependent element there, isn't there? Where you don't want to tell the other one how you're feeling in case they think it's because something they've done, and you get into this kind of vicious cycle of neither of you being able to actually sort out. You need to sort out your individual parts of the equation before you can collectively move forward, which can be a minefield in some respects.
No, you're spot on. And the thing is, up to 50% of dads will actually get depressed looking after a partner with postnatal depression as well, you know. So yeah, it's you know, was it because my wife was unwell? Was it because what I witnessed in trauma? Was it my ADHD undiagnosed at that time? The lack of sleep? Was it financial costs? Was it because I loved working with people, and I was, like we know now with COVID, you know, I was totally isolated in that first 6 months. You know, I couldn't even see my friends. When I did manage to get out, very rare. That's when my behaviours would change. You know, drinking. So, you know, and it was loads of reasons. Isolation was a big factor as well during that time. I was totally felt alone. And rightly so. My work's never about taking attention away from mum. It's about saying, look, dads can struggle with this as well, you know, for various reasons as well.
And one thing that I've written down here, it's interesting how often societies, or like if you go and talk to your mates about something, if you're kind of bothered about something, the kind of typical man way of saying how to deal with something is, oh, let's just go out for a beer, or let's go and have a beer and it'll all be all right in the morning, sort of thing. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having a beer. I'm not saying that at all. But I think the default mechanism for men is to self-medicate. And it sounds like, from what you're saying to me, your problem started from self-medicating in the first place because, and this is a kind of a different observation I'm going to make. One of the things I have noticed in doing podcasting and being involved in dads and dads communities and men is men have a kind of quite skewed relationship with thought, in the sense that I think a lot of guys, instead of facing down their thoughts and experiencing the full gambit of human emotion and feeling and stuff, we tend to self-medicate, and that can be to a lesser or greater degree. But the problem is when you stop self-medicating, then all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks. And if you're not equipped to deal with that, and I don't think any of us are equipped to deal with that, because let's face it, I don't think modern men and the modern world are not, you know, I talk about this a lot on social media, and I think that what I'm noticing, the more I'm involved with the kind of dadasphere or the menosphere or whatever you want to call it, there seems to be like it's like somewhere in the last few little while of evolution, men have dropped the ball of self-knowledge. You know, we know in Buddhism, we know in Stoicism, we know these ancient traditions taught, initiated and developed this wisdom and self-knowledge in men, which we seem to, I don't know when we dropped the ball, but we've dropped the ball somewhere. And I think we're getting the kind of ramifications of this at the moment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, exactly. You and what you say, a lot of men will suppress those feelings. Like I always, you know, rather than put it at the forefront of your problem as well. So, and it does, like you said, it will look different in fathers. Then they suppress those feelings. So dads will everything that mums go through with post-depressive thoughts. That is not one thing that dads can't have that either. So what about social services? Baby taken away, intrusive thoughts. What if we could do something to the baby? All these things. So what dad does, he takes himself out of that situation. He goes in a pub. So what my work is all about is communicating with both parents, saying, look, if your partner's acting differently antenatally or postnatally, then possibly you could be struggling. And as you know, fatherhood has totally changed in the last 20 years. There's more stay-at-home dads, single dads, same-gender parents. The pressures are totally different than it was when my father was a minor. Go to work, put food on the table. I'm a grandfather, and he was always there on the weekends. But I'm more involved with my son for the last 16 years than whether it's coaching him, football, all sorts of things. So all these different things have put pressure on, and unfortunately, the maternity services haven't caught up with the times in certain areas. I should say they are getting better, and that's one of the works we've been doing, changing policies and making sure all parents are supported for their mental health.
Yeah.
Because especially with men, that's why we got high rates of suicide in men. And that's only recorded suicide, mine. A lot of men will, drink themselves to death, they take drugs, they smash a car up, all sorts of things. So we know it's far higher. But that's why we should be looking at early prevention, because it'll save money, it'll save relationships. It's actually better for the child's development as well, if that is well mentally. So, you can, because the first 1,001 days is very important where the brain rewires in the baby as well. We're going too much into that tonight. It's really important, in our first 1,001 days of the baby's development as well. So there's loads of reasons why you should be looking at dad's mental health more.
Yeah. And I think if you're listening to this and you want to find out more about that, there's a previous episode that I've done with a guy called Ed Tronick who developed the still face experiment. You may have heard of this. Oh my gosh!
Did you interview him?
Yes, yeah. A few episodes back, a few months back, and I've mentioned this on here before, and for a long time people thought that the relationship between parents and babies was one way, i.e. The children and babies didn't pick up on the subtle cues and signs that mums and dads were giving off. Now, Dr. Ed Tronick and his team, they developed what's called the still face experiment. Mark knows about this, but I'm going to explain it to anyone that's listening.
It's mad because I show that video every presentation I do. Every presentation.
It's one of the most famous videos.
4 minutes, 29 seconds. I've seen it, I don't know how many times. And when you said that then, that is one the reasons why the work I do is so important. So yes,
yeah, no, that's right. So Ed Tronick is a pioneer in this field, and basically what he did was there's a very famous video which Mark's talking about, and basically it's a baby who's sitting in a high chair, and mum is sitting in front of baby and being kind of quite animated, quite chatty, quite happy, quite lively, and all of a sudden, this was done deliberately for the experiment, her face goes completely stone-faced, no reaction. Baby sort of starts to try and get mum's attention, keeps trying to get mum's attention, and tries to do probably 5 or 6 different things to get mum's attention, and then all of a sudden, baby starts getting distressed and upset. And the importance of it, and Mark will correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that it shows how on a deep level babies and young children are affected by their parents' mental state, and it's the best illustration you can show, isn't it?
Well, when the dad's one, the one that's the mum's been out for a good few years, but the dad's one's only the last couple of years. And it's exactly the same outcomes, like you just said, Joe. And yeah, exactly. It's it really hits home why we should be looking after dads as well, because like I said, there's loads of other reasons, adverse childhood experiences, there's loads of factors, alcohol, relationships are failing, where I've only just said recently that if we can support both parents in this time, then we can lower rates of suicide, we can save relationships, there will be better outcomes for the child's development. And that's the thing, because what I found was when I was depressed then, because I had a breakdown 4 years after all this happened, and basically my wife's depression came back because now she was caring for me, you know, so she was worried with me. So I didn't initially I had a breakthrough, I call it, 4 years after what happened. So I used masking all my emotions. I was just, you know, putting a happy-go-lucky face, you know, smile on. But deep down, I was really struggling inside. And it all came ahead where I lost my grandfather with dementia and my mother was diagnosed with cancer, which she's fine now, in 6 weeks of each other. And my timeline of everything that happened in my life, it was like a ripple. Everything was coming ahead. And I was physically fit during this time. I was doing a lot of kickboxing, sport, and I was, so physically I was really fit, but mentally it was impacting my physical health. You know, pins, all the stuff, and I was getting paranoid again, and my thoughts, suicide was getting worse this time. And luckily, my body just shut down, and I had no choice to enter community mental health service. But I'll go back a couple of years after I left sales. I started looking at myself thinking, I don't want to do sales anymore. I just want to do something. I want to do something different. So I went back to the youth club, which helped me as a child, that stand again. And then, unfortunately, there was a lot of young suicides in Bridgend, going back in 2007-8, my local community. Then I started to educate myself on mental health. Then I started working in hospital services. I still didn't get their help at that point because I thought if I go to the GP, they'd be on my notes and I would never get a job in mental health, which is the biggest myth and another myth as well. And it stopped me men actually getting help because they wanted that they, you know, roll in another job, it may be impacted as well. So, and I was working in security at the time, and it was basically after 8 weeks of recovery, medication, counselling, CBT, mindfulness, all this stuff I wish I was learned in school, you know, like you mentioned, you know, being still, meditation. At that point, I met a guy in the gym and I said to him, can I borrow the weights? And he said, yes. I got to go to NHS prams. My wife's got post Natal Depression. And I said to him side by side, I said, oh, what's the NHS prams? I said, I'm working in a hospital in Cardiff. And he said, like I said, oh, it's a service for my wife with post Natal Depression. I found out that Brian, and he don't mind me mentioning this because we've done work together, that he lost his house, business, lost everything, caring for his wife with post Natal Depression. And we set up a group called Fathers Reaching Out over 10 years ago. And it was only to support fathers with their partners with post Natal Depression. But a lot of time, the mums will phone me up and say, Mark, I'm fine. But my husband's mental health is actually impacting on my mental health since the baby's been born. And it's just gone from there then, really. And
yeah. And do you think that's by virtue of guys what I would call toughing it out?
Say again?
Do you think that's just because by virtue of guys, what I would call toughing it out while their wives are going through the mill at the same time?
Yeah, definitely. Trying to hold it all together, and then the partner sometimes go well, and sometimes, you know, year 6 or whatever, just take all that pressure and boom, you know, they can fall themselves. And you're right. It's just, you know, I didn't care about my own mental health. All I was concerned was my wife and Michelle, you know. So I just all these thoughts and feelings, I couldn't express it because I was worried what other people thought as well, which stops a lot of people. I was worried about all sorts of things. And I realized when I opened up to Brian side by side, there was another dad who understood what I went through. And it was like a genie bottle. It was like I was sharing everything. And it felt great. It was the first time I got good friends from 30 years, very close friends. I still couldn't tell him how I was feeling because it'd be like, come on, let's go watch a football, let's go down the pub, you know, that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So when Brian was telling me stuff and I told him, it was amazing. And I just didn't feel, and sometimes some dads want an acknowledgement that is another father has the same thoughts and parenting is not fun at the time and this sort of thing, because it's not as fluffy as sometimes it is, you know. It is hard sometimes, you know, financially, you know, loads of factors. Even social media now, when you got families going on holidays abroad, and Mr. Thomas up the road is struggling in food banks trying to provide for his family. So, you know, there's loads of different factors. Even with COVID now with dads, that's another area which is, dads are not going in labour wards and not being able to support their partners. So there's totally different pressures.
Yeah.
Right.
I've heard a lot of stories about that, particularly in the last little while, in terms of guys kind of feeling sort of excluded from the whole kind of birthing experience and stuff, which is kind of having a bit of a knock-on effect to kind of the connections. Again, coming back to electronics research, it's those connections and the oxytocin and those bonding chemicals that are released when you're bonding with children. So, you touching on the toughing it out that we've just sort of spoken about, what would you say to guys that are listening to this if they're hearing what you're saying and thinking, hang on a minute, I feel like what Mark's describing and I feel not kind of quite right. What would you say to guys that are thinking of toughing it out?
Yeah, it's a big thing, with stigma. I always think I love my sport and when you think of it, like, you got Frank Bruno, you got Joe Kazaki, Ricky Hatton, and Tyson Fury, probably the best British boxers of all time, and they've all struggled with their mental health for various different reasons. So if they can open up and share this experience, and I think the biggest man is actually seeking help, and it is hard. Don't get me wrong, but I think big problem is what other people think. The quicker the help, the quicker recovery. I always say, get the help as quick as you can, because like you said, it'll just manifest, and then it could be another tragedy happen a couple of years later, and then because you haven't dealt with all your past, all the issues you've had. At least now, if anything happens now, I've only got to deal with that. We just lost my mother-in-law, and I found my mother-in-law, unfortunately, and I only have to deal with that. I've dealt with everything else in my life. I've had to deal with that and know how to process that better now. So, it's about, don't suffer in silence, get the help. That's the most important. And there's loads of different services out there, a lot more now. You might not get more specialist father services, but there's like a Hub of Hope. There's loads of different services, NHS helplines, national helplines. There's loads of different services, which are popping up now because of the need of it now as well. So don't suffer in silence. Definitely not. I wish I never.
So reach out if you feel not right. The key is kind of reaching out and getting help in those early days. So I think it's
and what you're doing, you've got a community, and that's what we need. We need dads to have a community so they can have a chat and just talk about things, and that's enough sometimes with some fathers. Just offload, rather than suppress it. Just I'm having a problem today, and just have a chat. That can be enough sometimes.
Yeah, it's a peculiar mentality of us guys, in that we'll pull the parachute when we're about a meter from the ground instead of pulling it when a little while after we've jumped out of a plane. And I think this is the whole battle. It's getting guys to kind of pull the parachute a little bit, before they're going to hit the ground.
No, you're right. And what I will say is my son is more likely to open up to me now if he's struggling, because my wife works in mental health, I work in mental health. But he's, we check in with him, and even with COVID and GCSEs and all that now. So the next generation coming through as well, they'd be more, like I said, my family. I got a fantastic family, but you can imagine the mining community who's very much, come on, let's get on with it, and man up, all that stuff. So It's a different era. And I think the thing is as well is, I think, touching upon what you said about the kind of work, I think, I started working like the late 90s, so and you still had fax machines in offices then and that, but even then the pace of work was a lot kind of slower, and people would maybe go to the pub at lunchtime, and it wasn't too many years before that people were still smoking at their desks and stuff. But I think that the interconnectedness of the world has been a good thing in some respects, but it's also been a bad thing, because I think, and I'm going to sound like an old fossil saying this, but in the days when you had like fax machines, the fax would be put in the pigeonhole or whatever, and someone would get to it when they got to it, and people would field their calls, and they'd get a receptionist or someone to take their calls and stuff. So
and this I think it has impacts not just on mental health, but also on productivity, which I think actually the two of them are probably interlinked, because if you feel that you're not ever getting on top of your work at work, then that's going to affect your mental health. But I think the pace of work was a lot slower, I think, and there was a clear delineation that when the bell rang at whatever time it was you were going to finish, that's it, work's done. No one's ringing you at home on your mobile, because there isn't mobile phones, you know what I mean? And so I think there is in terms of the kind of pressures that dads face, I wouldn't say that they're any different on the face of it, but I think there's been an insidious push towards, employers having their pound of flesh in a lot of cases, and I think that one thing I've noticed in the last, certainly 2020, is I think there's a bit of a reset taking place, because a lot of my generation and probably yours, kids of baby boomers, who witnessed high interest rates or whatever it was in the 80s, houses repossessed, and boom and bust and whatever. And in your case, in your area,
the mining community,
in your area of the world, the mining community as well, that was decimated. And so it's I think culturally there's been this case of maybe our generation where you sort of think, well, we're scared of being in the same situation as our parents, where they've lost their jobs or lost their livelihoods or whatever. So we're going to work our balls off so that doesn't happen to us. But then that creates another problem, which is what we're getting to now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm like you said. I think COVID has actually helped me because I was rushing around everywhere as well. I was just and now I'm like, I go for walks in the morning, been playing chess with my son and all sorts of things. I'm more. I wouldn't say I was away a lot doing this, over the last couple of years, but certainly it's made me think I don't need to be on social media as much. I don't need to be this, and I'm starting enjoying the more basic stuff I used to do years ago as well. Even music. I've always loved music, and even get into the music more, which is good. Music therapy, even art therapy. There's all these little things that people can help with their mental health, and I think we're starting to understand mental health more. It's not just about anxiety and depression. It's actually, we all got mental health, but it's how to have good mental health as well as, unfortunately, stop it from manifesting into anxiety. Because as we know, high stress leads to anxiety, to depression, and unfortunately, killing men, unfortunately, as well. So we all got a bit of stress in our lives, but when it gets to the extreme stress and can't cope, that can also lead to anxiety, as we know. So it's just being aware, being in tune with each other, and sorry, in tune, that's with the baby, but being more alert and and understanding what triggers, if I'm doing too much, being overwhelmed, those sort of things. That's what I've learned over the last 10 years now. I've looked after my mental health better. Still get the odd days like everyone else, not fixed, and it's maintaining it and understanding it better. Because I didn't know what depression looked like when I was going through it. I just thought it'd be next day you get better, but it was just getting worse,
And I think the thing is that it's that awareness, isn't it? I mean, I have to be kind of quite careful in terms of, and it comes down to self-care, self-awareness, and I think that I know when I'm not right. I know my thoughts are going 10 to the dozen. I know that I get agitated. Your heart's pounding quite a lot, and you get short-tempered, and so one of the things that and I share this I'll share this on this podcast. One of the things I have is literally like a card, a laminated card. I don't know if I've got any here, but it's literally, and it's got stuff. Am I eating right? Am I sleeping right? Am I meditating? Am I going for a walk outside? There's 4 or 5 different things, very basic things. And I know, I've got to the point now where I know that if 1 or 2 of those things are dropping off, then the thought, you start getting racing thoughts, you start getting agitated and whatever. So it's so what am I not doing that I should be doing? Right, I've skipped breakfast this morning, or I've stayed up too late, or and it's they're not complicated. They're very amazingly basic things,
No, but that works for you, and exactly, and I can relate to exactly what you're just saying. I can definitely.
And it's good, and I think it's the ability to sort of, I spoke about this on a social media post this week about, because some people were like, well, I must do Stoicism, or I must do Buddhism, or I must do Jungism, or I must read scripture or whatever. And my point this week was that you may well find that you need to do a bit of meditation or a bit of journalism, or find what recipe works for you and makes you function optimally, and then apply that and then tweak it if you need to tweak it, or you find that you might need a bit more meditation or a bit less journaling, or find what works. And I think what I find with a lot of people is they see what someone else is doing and they're like, right, I must do what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just do the same, and it doesn't kind of work. So so meditation or journaling, that doesn't work. You know what I mean?
What works for me might not work for you as well. It's being person centered, and it's funny when you say about meditation. My wife does meditation as well. So if you ask my father to do meditation, my grandfather, they'd be like, and even parts of my community, meditation and mindfulness, and I try to explain to him, like, but this is something I learned 10 years ago. Not so much meditation, mindfulness then, but meditation it definitely works. It's slow. You can take it different levels, can't you? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, my wife does as well, and it just gives you a bit of space. And even walking, back to nature, that helps me a lot. I'll 2-hour walk, just get outside, out walking, be mindful, and being around.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's things that I would have dismissed over 10 years ago. I said, no, I'm not doing that, no way. But I know it works. It works for me personally.
Yeah.
And I tell people, just give it a go, and keep doing it and give it a really good go. And even books I read, I one of the things I read in sales, and when sales, I don't go back a bit, is it was Chicken Soup for the Soul by Jack Granfield, I think it is. And he was saying about looking, it was a lot of stories about what people have gone through in their lives and how they turned it. And I think it was 96, I read, or 97. And since that time, I've always been into mindfulness, not so much mindfulness, motivation books, all these books, and training my brain as well to motivate myself. When I was in sales, that's what, it was like a different mindset, but I've learned about, even though I had all those skills then in sales, I've learned to adapt, like the mindfulness or the meditation. CBT works for me as well. And I write my thoughts down, and then I process it that way, rather than get it out of my head. That works for me as well. Mood diaries, all these things, little coping skills. But exactly what you just said, Joy, is having a list and what am I doing not right today, and just growing myself then.
Yeah. It's that idea of not being a finished product and being a work in progress and an experiment. And I heard someone say recently, this concept of look at yourself as like a science experiment. You're trying different things and you're seeing whether it works. If it works, you carry on doing it. If it doesn't work, you stop doing it. And I notice now it's more what I'm not doing than what I am doing. And a prime example of that is over Christmas and New Year. I was getting up a bit late. Usually I get up at 5. I get up at 5 and I go to bed at 10. And just because I find that being an early riser it's just good for me. So, and over Christmas and New Year I was getting up later. And it was taking me ages to get to sleep. I was laying in bed till like 12 because I'm getting up later. And it's taken me a few days this week to sort of, getting up earlier, going to bed at 10 or whatever, for it to kind of self-correct. But you realise how, once you stop doing something, then you realise, the negative effect of not doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I, from a time, when I start my work, I wanted something good to come out of something bad. Me and my wife sat down and said, look, the group's got big, to the point where I had to pass over to another charity. We were doing a lot of voluntary with the dads. And so basically then I met this doctor then, and Dr. Jane Hanley, and being dyslexia is another form within the ADHD. And it's like, I'm okay writing, but I I can't process it. Questions I can't understand it as good. But so I've learned different things about that. But working together with somebody then, the academics then, I left school at 15, no qualifications, you know what I mean? And when I got into mental health, that's when I started building my qualification because I was interested in something. And that's the thing. I know I might be going off a subject years, is actually like I'm really interested if I interested in your work. Otherwise, if I weren't, I'd be over there now, sort of thing. So, so one thing in my community is saying that, even though I left school with no qualification at 15, trying to say, look, just keep going. You can do anything, and that's what that youth worker told me. Keep going, and I don't want to say, publish books now and articles and all sorts of work, TEDx talks and different things, which if I thought about it when I first started, I was just gone. So, if there's anyone out there who's going through any difficulties, when you are well and you've been supported, if I can do it, you can do it. You can do anything, So that's what I want to try to promote, really. That even though I went through all that stuff, Michelle went through a lot, far worse than me, but we wanted something good to come up with something bad. That's your point in my work, really.
Yeah. And the thing is when I've looked on your website as well, you're quite a modest gentleman as well, because if you're listening to this, Mark is held in quite high esteem via quite a large number of very preeminent people in the sphere in which you work as well, and so that's no mean feat considering what you've done. It's incredible to see, the accolades that you've got from the other people that you've been working with and stuff. And not only that, he's also founded International Fathers Mental Health Day. So, not content with all this other stuff, he's actually formed a day for fathers' mental health. So I do have to take my hat off to you, sir.
No, honestly, seriously, I'm like I said, I never have these conversations with my friends. Like I mentioned earlier on, we'd be talking about football and Cardiff City and all sorts of things. So it's, that's the thing about where I'm from. It's very much, it's surprising I've just gone on Facebook to share, because people say, "Oh, are you still doing that? Working in a hospital? Are you still doing the father thing?" Because on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, it's like a different network, people So I just I think I just want to inspire people in my own community as well to say, look, just because things that people say things to you and it hasn't gone too well, you can actually do more, with the right support and right what's the word I'm going to say? I'm going off on thoughts of it. But,
tools.
I just want to inspire people to say, look, if you're going through some sort of tragedy or things, to look at it as a positive, not once, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied now. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's your point. I don't want, I just want something good to come out, something bad in my life.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's been a really fantastic discussion we've had, and you explain your story and how these different things kind of kick into it, and what you've gone through, and how it kind of manifested itself has been really fascinating. And I think that it kind of underlines just that any of us can kind of go through this situation and come out the other end with a positive take on it. If there was 3 things that you would suggest to people that are listening, if they suspect that they are suffering from perinatal depression, or they suspect a male relative or friend or whatever is, what would you say are the sort of top 3 things to do in that situation?
Yeah, definitely speak to your health professional. Health visitors and midwives, they are there. They are there. They are there. They can signpost then to proper community mental health services. Even if you go to the GP, keep going back. Make sure you don't leave it until you get that proper support, because sometimes it could be medication counseling, and sometimes it could be simply just talking to somebody like we've done tonight. So basically, I would definitely just speak to somebody, have a chat with, your partner, say, look, I am struggling. It's nothing to be ashamed of. 39% of dads are concerned about their mental health. NCT November, 33% of new dads struggle in the first year of fatherhood. Mental Health Foundation, 38% of young fathers also were concerned about their mental health. All these reports. It's only now that mental health is coming out the forefront now. People understand it better. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. At the end of the day, you didn't go through it. I didn't go through it. I didn't mean to go through it. It's just something that happened to me. And so don't suffer in silence. Just make sure you talk to anyone anyone you feel. And the other thing is, I always say the Hub of Hope. The Hub of Hope is a database, and you put your postcode in, and it tells you what local services actually in the area. So there's Andy Mann's Club, there's all different services. You may not get services for fathers, like more special service, but there'd be men's groups, even like your community, just having a conversation with people. And I would definitely recommend looking at the NHS mental health helplines. You've got all the national charities on there, obviously, and if it's the point where like Samaritans and Calm, they're on there as well. So, like you said, there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like you said, it's especially since COVID, we've seen a massive increase in people wanting that support. My wife works, like I mentioned, we've seen a big increase in people with anxiety as well as a massive area. So yeah, just speak to somebody. Don't let it manifest.
All right, excellent. Now I'm going to ask you one last question before I bring the interview this evening to its conclusion. And it's a question that I've not primed you for, but I ask all guests on the Guild of Dads podcast this particular question, and it won't come as any surprise to you because I know you follow my social media posts. What is it in life, Mark, that gives you meaning?
I definitely helping people. I know it sounds like they're helping me more. I know it sounds really it's knowing that there's somebody else I've helped somewhere along the line. I think that gives me meaning, a lot of meaning in life, and I need some sort of legacy as well, for my son and all sorts of things, Yeah, so I got more meaning now than I had over 10 years ago. Not financially, but I got more meaning in my life. I got more purpose. I think purpose is one of the things why my recovery actually helped me a lot quicker. Setting up a group by accident give me purpose to help other people going through any struggles. So yeah, that's my meaning, definitely, just to help other people.
Excellent. I love it. I want to thank you very much for coming and speaking to me this evening. It's been a pleasure, like I say.
No, it's been I've enjoyed it. It's gone so quick. Honestly, thank you.
I appreciate the work you do, and the work that you're continuing to do. I know it's going to have a massive impact on a increasing amount of men and dads, and also families ultimately, because like I say a lot of the time, if dad is firing on all cylinders, that impacts everyone.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, there you go, Mark. Cheers, man. Take care.
Take care.